Unpacking today's headlines, this is Souls and Liberty in Depth.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to In Depth, the production of Souls and Liberty. It's not just tariffs, but turf that's prompting Donald Trump's actions towards Greenland. He's taking aim at blocking China from moving in on the mineral-rich national security island. Lots of people don't really get the connection and what Trump is doing. That's what we're going to be getting into a little bit today, as a Cold War may be heating up in the Arctic Circle. But first, today's In-Depth is brought to you by MyPillow.com and Real Estate for Life. MyPillow has a fantastic spring sale going on right now. It's even deeper discounts for Souls and Liberty viewers who just have to type in that Souls and Liberty promo code on the MyPillow.com website. And over at Real Estate for Life, if you want to buy or sell a home and support pro-life organizations at the same time, you can visit realestateforlife.org or text 248-431-1440. Be sure to mention Souls and Liberty, and we here at Souls and Liberty will receive a sizable donation. And here's the good part, at no cost to you. All right, as we were saying, Greenland and China and the United States. Let's do a little history, shall we? Back in 1867, President Andrew Johnson sent his Secretary of State, William Seward, to purchase Alaska from Russia for about $7 million. Critics called the deal crazy, even dubbing it Seward's Icebox and Seward's Folly. But when vast amounts of oil and gold were discovered, all of a sudden it was brilliant. Do you have another Seward's Folly shaping up here? Greenland is busting with copper, nickel, zinc, gold, diamonds, iron, titanium, tungsten, uranium. Greenland's got them all, as this little map here of the island shows you. Those are the mineral deposits, and they're everywhere. Some estimates put Greenland's total mineral wealth at more than $4 trillion. That's trillion with a T. But it's not just about mineral wealth the Chinese, of course, would like to move in on. I mean, who wouldn't? It's also about securing America's dominance for the seas for generations to come. The Arctic Circle is shaping up to be the next great arena of competition among the world's great powers. And here's this map right here to help you understand. We're looking at this sort of as God sees the world, looking down at the North Pole. We see here the four key players commanding the Arctic coast. Russia, in blue, dominates. Canada, on the opposite side, is in orange there. It ranks second as far as coastland up against the Arctic Circle. Greenland, in green. See how clever we were? We made that green because Greenland. Anyway. And coming in last is pink, the United States. Bringing Greenland into America's fold would more than double our Arctic coastline. Complementing Alaska's position in the northwest, Greenland would provide a critical base to the northeast, from which the U.S. military could protect our economic and military interests. So when it comes down to these two things, money and military interests, meaning national security, that's what's going on. We've got another map here we'll kind of explain both of these. Let's take a look. Russia is keen to capitalize on retreating Arctic ice. All the experts are saying that's what's going to happen, by radically expanding an existing seasonal shipping route along its northern coast, transforming it into a near year-round seaway. Seen here in red. See that little line in red? The Northern Sea Route, or the Northeast Passage as it's called, is thousands of miles shorter than today's primary route, which you can see there in blue, goes all around Europe and the Mediterranean through the Suez Canal past Egypt and swings all the way back up there. A voyage from St. Petersburg to Shanghai, for example, can take up to 50 days using that blue route, the Suez Canal. Using the Northern Sea Route, the same journey could take roughly 28 to 35 days. The cost savings would be astronomical. The Northern Sea Route is a key strategic asset for both Russia and China because they've both agreed to co-develop an infrastructure and transform it into a year-round shipping route. They've also agreed on joint Arctic Coast Guard operations to cooperate militarily to safeguard their shipping. The implications for world security, of course, are huge, or huge, as the president would say. Development of the route will allow Beijing to magnify its influence in and over the Arctic region, thereby augmenting its position in global trade. It will also enable transport of critical Russian resources like oil and gas to China, thereby strengthening Beijing's energy security. All of this has not only economic implications, but most importantly, military ramifications as well. The Northern Sea Route will enrich both Russia and, more importantly, China, the real threat to global peace and stability, allowing them to funnel more and more money toward building up their armed forces. A richer Russia and China will mean stronger military foes for the United States. But the Northeast Passage isn't the only waterway inside of the Arctic. Across the ice cap lies its North American counterpart, the famous Northwest Passage, which we see here on this map. The Northwest Passage is a series of passages, really, connecting the North Atlantic to the North Pacific. It allows ships to navigate the waters between Greenland and Canada and across the Arctic Straits. At present, the Northwest Passage is the shortest and most direct way to ship goods from the East Coast to Alaska, but it's seasonal at best. Remember, you're going through like the polar ice cap here. If the polar ice recedes as predicted, though, well, this will transform the Northwest Passage and revolutionize commercial shipping by allowing year-round navigation. An ice-free Northwest Passage is of keen interest to the United States, as well as many other countries, both economically and, again, militarily. As he moves forward with the building of what we can term Fortress Americana, President Trump wants as much control over the waters surrounding the United States as possible. The United States dominates the world economically, politically, and militarily, in no small part because we dominate the oceans. Without the U.S. Navy keeping order, there'd be chaos on the high seas. Whoever commands the water commands the world. It's kind of a nice rule of thumb you can go by. Russia knows this, so does China, and so does Trump, which is why he's intent on bringing Greenland closer, maybe even into the Union. So with all that background, joining us now to talk about all of this is Rod Martin, Christian patriot, anti-communist, political analyst, tech entrepreneur, and, dare I say, guru of the Greenland debate. Rod, thanks so much for joining us once again. Good to have you on again, brother.
Good to be here. Thank you.
Let's talk money first, because we want to get to the military part, because that's most important, particularly with all the China tariff stuff going on right now. How important to the U.S. is that kind of resource wealth? Remember, the estimates are put at about $4 trillion.
Well, it's extremely important. And you have mentioned the key concept that's going to define a lot of the middle of this century, which is that people don't take it seriously. They didn't take Alaska seriously. They don't take Greenland seriously. They just see it as an ice box, if they see it at all. And they feel the same way about the moon and asteroids and Mars. You'd think they thought it was made of green cheese or something. But the truth is, there is a gold rush, and not just for gold, very much underway, both on Earth and in space. Greenland's a really important short-term part of that, as we're seeing from the current trade war with China. China dominates rare earths, but they don't have to. There are plenty of rare earths elsewhere. Trump is talking about that in Ukraine, obviously talking about it in Greenland. We actually have a lot here. We just haven't bothered to exploit that as well as we ought to, because we've been lollygagging around, letting China become a major power when really we shouldn't be dependent on them, and we never should have. This is a vicious regime that enslaves its people, that murders its people. They killed more people than Stalin and Pol Pot and Hitler put together. And it's just insane that we would let our national security be dependent upon them.
Yeah, there's an expression sort of, I use it all the time anyway when I'm watching. I think most people know I'm a giant Notre Dame fan. I went there, graduated in '83. And, when you're in a game and you're winning and, you're almost kind of sleepwalking your way through. But there's this little thing that seems to happen is that instead of crushing the other guy and crushing him, putting your boot on his neck and ending the game before halftime, you kind of let them keep hanging around. You leave them sort of hanging around in striking distance, so to speak. So all of a sudden, the last half of the fourth quarter, it all of a sudden becomes much more exciting than it ever should have been. And you build like a psychological thing in the opponent's mind that, hey, we can actually do this. We can actually, we're not defeated at halftime, losing by 5 touchdowns. There's a psychology at play here as well, and I want to ask you about that. And look, everything you've said about the communist Chinese, absolutely spot on. They're murderers, they're killers, they're one-child policy, forced abortion, sense slave labor, all of that stuff. Absolutely, they're demonic in their orientation. But from a psychology standpoint, do you think they believe? I mean, there's still a big gap between the economies here. Do you think they believe? President Xi, for example, believes that they can actually overcome the U.S.?
Well, they certainly thought they could. They've realized that they are imploding demographically. And you alluded to mentioned the one-child policy a minute ago. The one-child policy was absolutely the wrong answer to all of China's problems. More people are better. This is just the creation mandate. Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. Yep. And the more people you have, the bigger your army can be, the more young people you have to support your elderly. And of course, the more division of labor you have, the more people you have, the more geniuses you have. And all of these things interact. So China in 1980 decided, oh no, overpopulation, and totally bought into the same globalist lie that Paul Ehrlich had been pushing since just before I was born. And, everybody's believed that all these decades. There have only been a few of us who've dissented. And all of a sudden, they're reaping what they've sown. They are on track to lose 75% of their population by the end of the century. So the real issue for Xi is he has to grab whatever he can while he still can.
Right.
They have, in the development economics terminology, gotten old before they got rich. And don't be fooled by the coast, which is indeed very wealthy, and they're all driving their Teslas and using their iPhones. Right. You get into the interior, and they are highly impoverished. And there's no way to overcome that when you have almost as many retirees now as you have working age people. That's only going to get worse. So they're very dangerous, especially for the next decade or two.
Yeah, that's the concern. They're kind of like, it's the wounded animal in the corner. How are they going to respond? And they think they're about to be killed. So let me go back then to the question of wealth. We're going to concentrate most of the show here on the military aspect of this, but I just want to take care of some of this wealth stuff. I mean, the Americans getting some of the mineral wealth from Ukraine. Who knows where that stands with the whole Ukraine-Russia thing going on, but. We heard, I'm pretty sure it was the Congo that said, yes, we'll do all this and we're going to, give you access to the U.S., going to give you access to, our multi-hundred billion, trillion, zillion dollars worth of minerals and all of that. China does have something of I don't want to necessarily say the trump card, pardon the pun. They don't necessarily have the trump card on minerals, but they are playing that more. I mean, I think most people were horrified to hear during COVID just how much of everything here in the United States comes from China. Pharmaceuticals, fentanyl, the various things we need to, advance the technology industry, all of it. And how do we offset that can we offset that in the short term?
The short term is a little difficult. I was just on Fox Business talking about this a couple days ago. There's going to be a little disruption. There's no doubt, but it's a big world. We're 26% of the global economy, but we're only 4% of the population. There are a lot of people who'd like to step into the gap, and that decoupling process began really even before COVID. So you have a lot of industry now in places like Vietnam and Thailand and other areas that you just weren't even thinking about 20 years ago. They're in a position to pick up a lot of the slack. They will pick up more and more. But you also see what Trump is doing. He's not just trying to secure supply of raw materials. He's also encouraging investment into manufacturing capacity in the United States. We're up to about 6 trillion, I think, in new foreign investment. That's extraordinary. There's never been anything like that in American history. This president's moving so fast, it's unbelievable. So
yeah, to
yes,
put that in perspective,
some short.
if I can interrupt you for a second, Rod, just for the viewer, if we put that in perspective, that foreign investment that has been promised and in its various stages of being done, that represents nearly the entire federal budget of, like, what is it, 6.8 trillion or whatever it is. I mean, I don't think that's appreciated anywhere near to the degree it needs to be. I mean, you've just taken what amounts to the annual federal budget and gotten other companies, nations to invest that here in the form of commerce and manufacturing facilities and all of that. That's mind-blowing in less than 100 days.
Well, and it's also 2 or 3 times the entire economy of a number of our largest trading partners and NATO allies. It's just an extraordinary number, and it's just beginning. It's just ramping up. And I think we're going to get to a pretty amazing free trade deal reasonably rapidly. Trump has forced them, Bill Ackman's been talking about this too, Trump has forced them to confront the reality of the massive economic dislocation and the certain recession or even depression a lot of them will face if they don't come to terms. And Trump's been very clear. A 0-0 tariff structure is perfectly fine. That's better, because what that represents, what that represents, and your viewers have to understand it, it's not about collecting the tariffs. I mean, we'll collect some tariff and that'll be nice for the deficit. But what it's really about is access to markets.
Yeah.
A lot of these countries are blocking U.S. access to markets when they themselves have tremendous access to the U.S. market. That's something we decided to do during the Cold War to help our allies get back on their feet after World War II. That's something we did to keep the team together against the Soviets. That all makes sense, but it doesn't make a lot of sense 35 years after the Cold War when we're still spending 70% of the collective defense budget of NATO, which is just absurd.
Yeah. And
when we're letting Europe charge us 4 times the tariff we charge them on automobiles, Canada 280% on some of our dairy goods. That doesn't mean they collect a huge tax on our dairy goods. That means no one in Canada buys our dairy goods. So
exactly.
It's obscene, and Trump is just taking it straight on. So if you could get to true free trade, it's gonna unleash a big chunk of that golden age he's talking about. Meanwhile, he decouples from China, he secures our supply chain, he puts them in a more isolated position, and he makes them a lot less dangerous. And we just saw that with the deal Hegseth signed in Panama too. That's a really big deal that people aren't paying much attention to because trade sucked all the oxygen out of the room.
Right, exactly. Yeah, a lot of things aren't being talked about just because of that, including Greenland. I mean, which topic of this show, Greenland was all over the place, whatever, in the first 2-3 weeks. And, you said, oh, maybe, we'll do this. And people were going, oh, my gosh, is he going to invade Greenland? And,
Well, actually, Panama gives us the template for that. He talks about, we're going to take back the canal. Well, we just did. We took it back from China. We didn't take it back from Panama. That's not necessary. But on the other hand, Trump is a master negotiator. He's been writing about this since 1987, for heaven's sake. He starts with this big, bold ask, and he ends up where he actually wanted to go. In this case, we're going to resume a military presence in Panama. Yep. We're going to have 100% free access for the U.S. Navy to the canal. Previously, they were charging us, which is just obscene. We built that canal.
Yeah, we built
that. And crucially, you'll notice, we worked out this deal, an American consortium. Don't love that BlackRock led it, but it's not that important. These guys are seeking to buy the ports in Panama that are currently controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. Well, Xi Jinping freaked out about that, and he's blocking it. So guess what? While we're down there, Panama announces they've audited Hutchison-Whampoa, and they've discovered that it owes them about $1.6 billion in a couple different ways, and it has there's shady aspects of how they negotiated both the lease and the renewal. All of a sudden, you've got a carrot and a stick. You know, we can either go through with this transaction, and Hutchison, which is a CCP-controlled company, they can either make a big profit on their investment, or in the alternative, Panama can just cut their lease and take those ports from them, and BlackRock's going to end up with them either way. So that's your template. There's no desire, I don't believe, in the White House to conquer Greenland or to subjugate the people somehow. But there is a desire to bring them into a free association compact with the United States, much like what we have with Palau and the Marshall Islands and Micronesia. Right. And those are really good deals for the locals. It turns out independence is really expensive. And it's not just military. The need to build embassies all over the world and staff them, and just all this incredible stuff you don't think about. And it's ridiculously expensive for a country like Greenland with only 57,000 people. Yeah. So if we can give them the benefit of independence without the cost, that's a win all around. And it's something Denmark has certainly not been able to give them. And Denmark doesn't have either the technology or the investment capital to develop Greenland. So what happens is we're either going to do it or the Chinese are. Right. And the Chinese are already all over the place.
Sure. Well, let's make that shift right now on the show if we can. I want to go to the strategic priorities, the mineral wealth and all of that. I think most people sort of get that. It's great. It enhances everything, gives us, rare earth, things that we need here in the U.S. for industry, particularly a technology industry. But I'm taking it that you would propose or think that it's the strategic/military agenda items that are the most important when it comes to Greenland, right?
Unquestionably. And you don't have to have one iota of global warming for it to really matter. Greenland is the anchor of the Greenland-Iceland-UK gap. That is the only way the Russians ever get a nuclear submarine or any kind of fleet into the North Atlantic to threaten American and European shipping. That was a vital waterway we had to control in World War II, and we did. And in fact, the United States Army occupied Iceland and Greenland during the war, much to the consternation, I'm sure, of Denmark, but Denmark was a little busy being occupied by the Germans. Exactly. So there wasn't a lot they could do. But, after the war, we gave back Greenland, and that proves probably to be a mistake. We've had bases there all these decades. That's good. Nothing wrong with that. But Denmark can't possibly defend Greenland. We are the ones defending Greenland. And Greenland wants to be independent. And they've made that perfectly clear. Every party in this last election made that clear. Independence is the agenda. The only question is terms and timing. Okay, well, let's give you an even better deal. You get to be independent. You get to be sovereign. You get to run your own show. You don't have to deal with the Danes. And also, you're in free association with the power that you're going to end up doing a deal with anyway.
Well, let's talk about this, actually, because I think most people might not understand, because there really hasn't been a lot of either informed or unbiased reporting in the media on this. And again, the tariffs of, they're the ones standing on, the headlines of every story and everything. Like the only thing going on in the world is tariffs. But, this is kind of a two-step process. The Greenlanders would have to first say, we want independence from Denmark. Then step two is, okay, what's our relationship, if there's going to be one, with the U.S.? So I want to ask you, what's the process for achieving those goals, kind of the whole Denmark control question to start? The likelihood that Greenlanders are down with this, are they not? And before we get to that, I just want to put up some really kind of stark numbers, actually. This is a graphic we have showing what's called Greenland's misery index. We're going to start with the poverty rate. After hundreds of years as a colony of Denmark, the island remains economically underdeveloped. as you alluded to, with nearly 1 in 5 residents living below the poverty level, 17.5%. That's the highest in the Nordic world of a poverty level. The nation has a stubborn, sky-high high school dropout rate. Again, we're only talking about 57,000 people here. Pre-COVID, more than half the country's students even failed to graduate from high school. Greenland struggles with crisis of domestic violence and child sex abuse. 41% of young women and 33% of young men report experiencing violence in their childhood home. 41% of young women and 12% of young men also report suffering sexual abuse as children. Alcoholism, I guess shouldn't be much of a surprise, is a major problem. One study revealed, this is a staggering number, that half of Greenlanders who are 35 and under grew up in alcoholic homes. Another survey found that almost half the population engages in binge drinking at least once a month. And perhaps the saddest part here, Greenland is the suicide capital of the world. In 2022, the suicide rate was 71.3 per 100,000 residents. Of course, it's not 100,000 residents, but that's how these things are measured statistically. That's more than 6 times higher than any other Nordic country and one of the highest in the world. 1 out of 5 Greenlanders has tried to take his or her own life. 1 out of 5. That's 4 times the global average. Rod, those numbers are, it's hard to kind of get your brain around them. Again, we're only talking about a very tiny population of 57,000 people. That is an affliction if there ever was one.
Greenland is a handful of small towns, and they don't have any opportunity, and they don't have anything to do. This is why you had so much alcoholism in the United States before Prohibition, that people actually amended the Constitution to do away with alcohol, because they didn't have anything to do. And Prohibition was largely successful, although it created this huge, mafia apparatus that we had to do away with. But nevertheless, it significantly reduced American alcohol use. Greenland isn't going to have anything like that. Nobody's going to be dumb enough to have Prohibition again. So, what can they do? Well, you got to create opportunity, and you've got to have economic development.
Bingo.
One stat that you didn't mention is that 72% of the Greenlandic population is 40 or younger. 40 or younger, 72%. They have no future. And if they were all, not U.S. citizens, but U.S. nationals, they could come and go freely to the U.S. They could get educations here. They'd qualify for every imaginable scholarship, of course. And if they wanted to stay in New York or Boston or Kansas City, good for them. Not a problem. It's an easy thing for us to absorb 5,000 Greenlanders. That's just not a big deal. Yeah. But at the same time, if we have a bunch of investment into Greenland and we have expanded military facilities in Greenland, we're going to be pumping a lot of money into that economy. There are going to be a lot of great jobs for these young people. We're going to go out of our way to have training programs so that those jobs do go to Greenlanders. And that's going to be fantastic for everybody. That is Donald Trump's mantra. His deals are all win-win. He may beat you over the head with it, but after you're done, you're going to be happy. That's exactly what's going to happen here.
You're going to be happy and you're going to love it.
You actually will.
Yeah, the funny part is that's true this time.
Well, it absolutely is. Look at his classic deal from The Art of the Deal.
Right.
He talks about how he needed the air rights to be able to build Trump Tower as tall as he wanted it to be.
Right.
And it's sitting across the street from Tiffany's flagship store. Well, the jeweler did not want Donald Trump to have this. And so he went to his architect, and he had the most beautiful building he could conceive of drawn up. And he had the ugliest building he could conceive of drawn up. Right. And he took it to the Tiffany's guys and said, look, I'm going to ruin your property values by building this hideous building next door to you unless you sell me the air rights, which I'm going to pay you really well for. And of course, they sold. Well, what happened next? Both companies prospered dramatically because of the sale. And That's how he deals. He's tough, but everybody wins afterward.
Yeah, I guess part of it's probably in the business world. You know, you've got people sort of on that like rarefied air thing. The egos must be tremendous and all of that. And it's like, well, you know, he may be saying it right, but, you know, I don't want to like, you know, admit that he's smarter than me or got a better offer. I mean, whatever, all that human psychology stuff that goes on. But yeah, I used to walk past that whole thing every day when I was working at CBS in New York as a young buck. Get off at Grand Central, walk up Fifth Avenue to 57th Street, make a left, and head down to CBS. But yeah, I'd pass in front of Trump Tower and Tiffany and that whole area right there every day on the way to work. It was quite beautiful. It's a very lovely place. Rod, we're going to take a quick break here, just a moment, to remind our viewers that In Depth is sponsored by MyPillow.com. MyPillow.com is having a fantastic spring sale going on right now. It's spring, it's beautiful, it's lovely, and so is the sale. So just visit mypillow.com and just type in that promo code Souls and Liberty. You see it right there at the bottom left, and you go to their webpage, you type that in, and you'll get even deeper discounts. So, Rod, welcome back here. You always got to pay the bills. You get that. It sounds sort of strange, I suppose, but Greenland is actually part of Trump's America First vision, right? I mean, you know, he's offshoring it, sort of.
Well, it's not that much offshore, as you know. It's really legitimately part of North America, even though ethnically and historically, you know, it was more European. I don't think that's really true anymore. Most of the Danish settlers died out centuries ago, so it's mostly people who are related to the same folks who live in northern Alaska. Greenland is an essential part of North American security. And we've forgotten about some of these things because we've been in such a luxurious position for so very long. Right. But you have to control the approaches to North America for the United States to have any national security at all. There was a time when we worried about invasions by the British or by the Germans or by whomever. Those days are long past because, as you rightly said, the U.S. Navy controls the world's oceans. And that's a wonderful thing for everybody. The truth is, China's economy would be impossible if the U.S. Navy didn't keep the seas free for them to export all that they send to the rest of the world. And that's true for Europe. They have virtually no navy worthy of mention. And yet Germany, for example, the world's third largest economy, 48% of that economy is exports. So clearly they need us. They just kind of resent the fact that they need us. We need Greenland. We need it to be able to control that Greenland, Iceland, UK gap insofar as Russia is still a threat. And Russia's in that same position that China is in a very meaningful way. They're trying to grab what they can before they can't. And that hasn't gone anywhere near as well for them in Ukraine as they thought it would. But nevertheless, they could be a real threat. They have nuclear submarines and they've been developing, bragging about developing these torpedoes that would launch a nuke into an American harbor and irradiate it for the next 1,000 years. You know, obviously we've got to have control over access to our coast, and Greenland is key to that, just as the Panama Canal is key to that.
Do you? Well, let's go back to the question here. You know, we've got to get control of it. I mean, if the Greenlanders don't say, "Hey, we want to partner with you," then then our options invade. Which I'm just being silly here, but tell us what the media has not told us, because every time you turn around and hear from the media, it's 9 billion% of Greenlanders don't want anything to do with the United States and they hate us and blah 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 and all that and everything. And yet a lot of your recent postings have been like, well, not a big surprise, but that's total BS because it's coming from the media. What is the actual on-the-ground activity going on about, first, the question of independence from Denmark? Where does that stand? What's that look like?
Pretty much everybody wants to be independent of Denmark. Nobody's happy with the Danes. And that's the part that the Europeans don't want to acknowledge. Oh, yeah, we'll let them be independent. Yeah, but the point is they want to be independent. They don't like you. So, that's problem number one. this is a shifting target. It's moving around, and the conversation we're about to have with the Greenlanders is going to change minds, I think, right and left. But what we have right now is dueling polls. There's a poll done by a Danish newspaper in conjunction with a left-wing Greenlandic newspaper that's basically a push poll saying that 85% of Greenlanders are just horrified by the idea of Donald Trump and everything that we're trying to do. Okay, well, maybe that's true. But one of the most accurate pollsters in the United States in the 2024 election found the exact opposite. They found that 57% of Greenlanders were very interested in some kind of union with the United States. The younger you were, the more you liked it. And
there's that trend. There's that trend again with the young.
Yeah, exactly. And moreover, among the reasons cited for those opinions were the trauma of Danish colonization, yeah. I kid you not, the belief that America would better protect their environment in the course of development than either Denmark or China, and just a general hope for economic opportunity. And you've nailed it there. This is a poor country. It's a poor place, and it doesn't have to be. It can be crazy rich.
Sure.
And you see that in Alaska. Alaska is a pretty amazing place because we developed it and we gave the locals opportunity. That can happen here.
Yeah. I mean, you go back, like we started the show out with the discussion of, Seward's Icebox, Seward's Folly. I mean, 150-ish years later, 170 years later, what do we have? I mean, we've got a state, doing reasonably well economically. It's mostly conservative, reasonably so, I suppose. It's a red state more than a blue state. And there's great mineral wealth there. We all remember the Alaska oil pipeline and, all of that. And so in the areas, what did it look like when, Secretary of State Seward went there and was in 1867. He's like, oh, this is kind of a bit depressing here, and there's not much going on. And if fentanyl would have been a thing back then, it probably would have been there. But if you can just take that model and move it over as a template and put it on Greenland, you can see why Greenlanders would say, yeah, we want to. We want to cozy up with the U.S., maybe not become a state, like Canada's going to do.
Nor do we want them to.
Nor do we want them to.
That's
right.
not in the cards. They're too little. I mean, on the one hand, you have this island that's bigger than the Louisiana Purchase. It's like a third the size of the United States. But at the same time, you only have 57,000 people, which, by the way, is comparable to Alaska a century ago. So not completely crazy, but there are a lot more people in the world than there were a century ago too. So it's something that is very doable in a way that all these people benefit dramatically. And you mentioned energy. One of the ways that Alaska is about to become even crazier rich than it already is we're about to build this Trans-Alaska natural gas pipeline.
Right.
We're going to be shipping LNG like crazy, which we haven't been able to do before, from Alaska to places like Japan and South Korea and Taiwan, which secures their energy supply line instead of having to come from the volatile Middle East and around India and through the Straits of Malacca and past all those Chinese fake islands in the South China Sea, blah, 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 all protected by the U.S. Navy. Nope, just a hop, skip, and a jump from Valdez to Tokyo. No problem. Okay, same thing for Greenland. Greenland has an insane amount of oil and gas that we haven't talked about. That could supply Europe and get them free of Russian supply. That could be a really big deal for decades to come. And nobody's developed it because, honestly, only the Americans have the technology to develop it.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, people have to understand, and I think they get it, but you don't really think that deeply about it. I mean, you're boring through icebergs and, glacial caps and everything. I mean, this is, it's not just going off, over here into West Texas oil fields and, putting a stick in the ground and pumping air in. I mean, it's a whole different, I mean, the principle's the same, but the challenge is something completely opposite. I mean, it's 83 degrees here in Houston today and lovely, and, makes oil drilling and all of that a little bit easier than wearing parkas and dressing up like the Michelin Man and trying to break through ice caps 400 miles deep.
And not harm them. I mean, that's the other thing. We actually have tremendous amount of experience drilling in areas that are environmentally sensitive and doing so successfully.
Correct.
If you'll recall, when we were much younger, there was all this environmentalist cacophony about how the Trans-Alaska oil pipeline was going to ruin the environment. It was going to kill off the caribou herds and all this stuff. No, actually, the caribou love it. They rub up against the pipeline because it's warm, and the herds have multiplied. So all of that is wrong, and the U.S. knows how. We've got decades of experience, basically my whole lifetime of experience working in these environments, doing these exact things. That will make Greenland as rich as Dubai. I mean, it's just crazy what's possible. That's before you get to rare earths. That's before you get to military. And what that does, the geopolitical aspect of that is not just U.S. security, it's European security. Most of that energy would get shipped to Europe. We make money on it. Greenland makes money on it. But the Europeans get loose from the boot on their throat with Russian energy. Correct. Nobody seems to get that the Europeans, since the beginning of the Ukraine war, have sent twice as many euros to Moscow for energy as they have to Kiev for aid.
Yeah.
Twice. So they're funding the Russian war effort, and they're completely dependent on that supply, which is absurd because we could be supplying them with LNG from Louisiana and Texas. Sure. But regardless, they made bad decisions in the decade prior, just as they have on defense. I mentioned earlier, we pick up 70% of the collective defense budget of the NATO alliance. These aren't allies. These aren't partners. These are dependents. They're right. Teenagers in our basement. It's time they got a job. And we can help them with that. Greenland is a part of that.
So do you think open your crystal ball here. The tariffs news is, going to do what it's going to do between now and, say, the summer, however that plays out. And, of course, we hear the Democrats, communist Democrats in D.C. raging. Doesn't matter what Trump was right. I could say, hey, there's a cure for cancer. It'd be like, why did it take so long? They'd find something to, go on about because they got Trump derangement syndrome. But once attention starts to turn to Greenland, what do you imagine will be the commie Democrats in D.C.'s objection to this? I mean, it looks like kind of a no-lose, win-win situation. But if you can find anybody to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat, it would be these guys. What do you think is going to be the objection?
We have them defending domestic terrorism now against Tesla. We have them defending judges requiring that known murderers, rapists, and terrorists be reported to the United States after we got rid of them. The things they are willing to defend at this point are just absurd. It's very much like the situation we saw in Great Britain in 1983 when Margaret Thatcher had just won the Falklands War. She's riding high. The economy is picking up. Everything is improving. And Michael Foot ran as the leader of the Labour Party on a platform that included things like leaving NATO and joining the Soviet Warsaw Pact. I mean, it was just crazy. And of course he got thumped. I mean, it's one of the biggest general election victories in British history, Margaret Thatcher's in 1983. That's where the Democrats are headed, absent cheating, at the rate they're going. So with Greenland, I'm sure they will pick it apart in every imaginable way. I'm sure environment will have something to do with that. I'm sure that they will treat this as some kind of imperialistic venture by a crazed dictator, Donald Trump. But I don't think they really get anywhere with that. Most Americans think that Trump's doing a pretty good job here. And once he gets done with the charm offensive in Greenland that's for sure coming when, in its due course. I think what we're going to see is a package that involves actual cash money going to every Greenlander very directly, and a lot of opportunity that they just can't imagine having at present. I think we win them over. I don't know how quickly, but I think we've got the outlines of a deal. And I think it's going to be very hard for Democrats to oppose it without looking stupid and anti-American.
Which they don't seem to care about right now, no matter what the topic is.
Not at all.
Go ahead, guys. Keep at it.
Down.
What's the old expression in Washington? Your enemy's like screwing himself. Shut up and get out of the way. So, Rod, I ask you.
And the last president to go after Greenland was Truman, for heaven's sake. Yeah. The last president to occupy Greenland was FDR. Right. They are completely unhinged from their own moorings because they just have to reflexively oppose the president no matter what he does.
Yeah, that's true. Hey, here's a gold bar. Why is there only one?
Yes, and you stole it from Native Americans or something.
Exactly.
It's crazy.
It just turns into such a giant political eye roll after a while. No wonder they're all, taking Ozempic and everything else they can get their hands on, Prozac, over at the DNC headquarters. I just want to ask you about, and go back to Greenland here. It seems like with this massive injection of, American optimism and American cash, which, yeah, I agree. 57,000 people, give each one of them, I don't know, $10,000 or something. There you go. It seems, or 100,000, whatever it would be. Actually, we did a little math here. I can't remember what the numbers were, but giving them, I can't remember what it was, a certain amount each would actually be cheaper than what we paid in real dollar terms for Alaska back in the 19th century. But again, it's owing to this kind of propaganda, I suppose you could call it. That seems like too polite a word in the media. It seems like, well, maybe will they hesitate? Again, sort of go through with us what the actual sentiment on the ground is in Greenland, and what do you think the driving factors of that are on the left? Anti-American propaganda, and it's conflicting with polling data. I mean, what do you think is behind all of this?
Well, they have a bad media too, and so that's part of it. And the Danes have been, again, reflexively anti-Trump. The previous government in Greenland was left of center and very anti-American in a lot of ways. The new government is interesting. It's a coalition government with the leading party at about 30% and the second party at 24-25%. So they've got a governing majority, but it's pro-business, it's center-right, it's certainly open to some kind of deal. It has taken the same line as everybody else. Oh, we don't want to be annexed by America. Well, we don't want to annex you. I mean, that's not really the issue. Right. But there is a free association compact here to be had where you get your cake and eat it too. You get independence and you don't have to pay for it.
So let me interrupt you right there for a second. See, explain to us what is free association, and what is the benefit of it to each side? What is a free association compact? Is it just like a business deal?
Kinda. We pioneered these because we had all these Pacific islands after World War II that we'd captured from the Japanese. And before that, the Japanese had captured them from the Germans during World War I. Right. At that time, Japan was one of the allies. So, in World War II, we capture all these islands. They're tiny, but there are a gazillion of them. Collectively, they don't have a very big population. And we were given a UN trust territory status over all of them. Well, at some point, they decide, wait, we want to be independent, and we're too little for you to ever give us statehood. So how are we going to work that out? And we came up, we've got two different solutions there. One is the standard unincorporated territory route that we have with Guam and the Virgin Islands and other places. But with these three, Micronesia, the Marshall Islands, and Palau, they actually wanted to be sovereign, independent nations. And we're like, cool, no problem, but you can't afford it. So how are we going to make that work? So we invented this compact of free association where the people of each of those countries are citizens of their own country, but they're U.S. nationals. They can come and go pretty freely to the United States. And we pay some of their social services costs. We pay 100% of their defense costs, and we manage their foreign policy. They can't go make a deal with China without us saying yes. And so that's good for us. It's good for them, and everybody wins. That's a perfect template, actually, for Greenland. And there are other possibilities. We could do something like we've done with Puerto Rico, for instance, and that's worked out actually pretty darn well for Puerto Rico.
Sure.
But I don't think that's what's on offer here. I don't think that's where Trump's going to go with it, and I don't think that's what the Greenlanders want. I think they're pretty committed to the idea of independence. We've got a way for them to do it where they have their cake and eat it too, and It's going to be a pretty nice cake by the time Trump is done.
Yeah, it sure seems like it. So, I think that's helpful for people to understand. You know, we all understand what a state is, and all of that inside the 50 United States, and what are all these various kind of deals we have worked out. There's various levels of things as far as the relationship goes, militarily and defense, all that. That's a very helpful explanation. Rob, we're going to take just a couple more questions for you in a moment, but first, of course, got to pay some bills here. So if someone is thinking of selling or buying a house, well, look at this graphic who just popped up. Here's a great way to support Souls and Liberty in the process while also supporting the life of the unborn. Real Estate for Life has 1,400 faith-based experienced agents all around the country to assist you, and they contribute a percentage of their commission at zero cost to you, to us here at Souls and Liberty. So whatever their commission is, they don't up your rate. They don't do anything like that. Whatever their standard commission is, 6%, 3%, whatever it is, they take a portion of that because it was kind of a easy call for them. It doesn't cost them anything to go do it, so they give us a portion of that back as a thank you for referring business to them. Again, doesn't cost you anything. There are 3 easy ways to contact them. You can go by email, which is right there, info@realestateforlife.org. If you want to talk directly to somebody, you can call their 877 number, 877-543-3871, 877-543-3871, or you can send them a text at 248-431-1440. Great people. We've been associated with them for, I don't even know, 10, 12 years or something like that. They're great guys who started it. Dave and Mary started it all. Great people, honest as the day is long, care about life, care about supporting pro-life organizations like us here at Souls and Liberty. So if you're looking to move or sell, or someone in your family is, write down Real Estate for Life. All right, Rod, back with you now. Can you explain how last month's election results in Greenland kind of marked a new chapter for them? You said the previous government was, more kind of anti-American and all of that. Does this sort of set the stage? And if you can do that breakdown one more time, does it set the stage for, what was it? I think you said 30%, were this, another 27%. I mean, it's a majority of people who are like, we want independence, right?
Oh, yes. Everybody seems to want independence. I don't think anybody wants to still be part of Denmark, but they haven't cut the cord for the very good reason that they're dependent on Danish subsidies. They need that $1 billion a year that comes in from Copenhagen. So they haven't just been super excited about pulling the trigger, but they all want to. And that's another piece of this. Trump has a way for them to come out way ahead of that. I mean, we would spend a lot more there than that, and it wouldn't be subsidy as much as real economic development and real jobs generating real tax revenue that Greenland would have legitimately on its own. So this is a much better thing. But as I said, the ruling coalition now is this center-right coalition that wasn't supposed to do anything. The leading party doubled its vote share from the prior election. The second party tripled its vote share from the prior election. This was a huge upset, and the American media pretended it wasn't and poo-hooed that idea. No, it was actually really a big deal, and they're very pro-business. Greenland's governments have been left-wing for as long as anybody can remember. Very pro-business, very open to some kind of deal. They're taking the appropriate, I think, negotiating position that, oh, we don't want to be annexed by the U.S. Well, that's what they ought to be saying as they go into the deal room.
Right.
And we can work out a deal that gives them what they want and gives us what we want. And it's got to move that way anyway. There's no way Donald Trump, or for that matter, Ron DeSantis or J.D. Vance or any other Republican president that's likely in the next 10 or 20 years, there's no way that we're going to let China dominate that space. And that's really the only other place the Greenlanders have to go. It wouldn't necessarily be an annexation, just like we don't want to annex them, but it would be a sphere of influence. And you mentioned the global warming issue. Whether you believe in global warming or not, it really doesn't matter. I think what we have seen over the last 25 years is so much new attention paid in wealthy countries to the value of those trade routes that you're going to see an increase in construction of icebreakers, probably nuclear-powered icebreakers, and you're going to free up the Northwest Passage in particular reasonably soon. So Greenland becomes even more important because of that, but it's plenty important about it.
Yeah, it seems... Okay, so as we look down the road here, in the what sort of time frame are we talking about? And what do we expect to see next? We're getting close to the end here, so we got to work in this very last question. But what do you expect to see next? I mean, look, it's Trump versus the EU and Denmark. It's the globalists, it's the Greenlandic left, which doesn't really seem to be much of a issue anymore. What do you what happens next? Is this stuff still going on? I mean, Vice President Vance went there. Everybody's been there saying, hey, yeah, here we are. We love you guys. We're great. Greenland's important to us. So what's the deal? Let's get moving.
The deal is this president is doing more than any other president has ever done in a similar time period in history. So they've got a few things on their plate. But as you said, we've had major officials go to Greenland. It's not a back burner thing. It's just not the most front burner thing. We just got the deal done with Panama that I think gets you all the way ultimately to where Trump wants to be there. The key remaining piece is getting Hutchison-Whampoa out of the Panamanian ports. Everything else is in place, and that's in progress. So I think next up is the Greenland operation. They clearly have a few things on their plate, negotiating trade deals with 70 plus countries right now. And in this game of chicken with China that China can't possibly win. Right. And if your viewers would like to see why, go to rodmartin.org and I explain to you why China can't win this, but they're kind of backed into a corner, so they're going to fight a little. But ultimately Trump's going to win that. Greenland has to fit in there somewhere, and I think it'll be pretty quick because I think this administration understands we could lose the midterms. We did in 2018, and then you spend the next 2 years fighting off impeachment. So, we got to get things done in the months we have prior to November, December of 2026. And so I think you'll see some movement on this pretty quickly. I think it will ultimately involve a charm offensive in Greenland. I think a lot of money is going to change hands, and I think we're going to make them a deal they can't refuse. Yeah,
and frankly, why would they want to refuse? I mean, they've got the status quo of those horrible statistics we went over earlier in the show, and they want their independence, and they want to be booming and cool and, have a life and a future and a hope and all of that. Seems like, talk about a win-win. All right, Rod, thanks again very much for joining us. And always, as usual, terrific insights. Never a dull moment. Everything you speak is, full of grace. One last little plug for yourself there, Rod. Where can people find you?
please come to rodmartin.org, either our free or our premium service. We're putting out a ton of in-depth analysis every single day, and there's just nothing else like it out there. You can't get anywhere else what you get at rodmartin.org. And while you're there, click the link up at the top left side of the page to my X. We have almost 200,000 followers on X now. That's up from a little over 20,000 at the beginning of January. So obviously something pretty cool is going on, or we wouldn't be drawing that big a crowd.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Rod Martin, thank you very, very much. Again, as usual, we'll have you back on as soon as something else cool happens that you know everything in the world about. Thanks, brother. All righty. If you like how we approach things here at Souls and Liberty, please consider a monthly donation. Just click on the provided link. Souls and Liberty is a voice illuminating truth, defending freedom, and advancing a Christ-centered culture. So please support us in our work, because it's really your work. Thanks again. Until next time, coming to you from Houston, Texas, yeehaw! I'm Gary Michael Voris. God love you.